They say 65 is a milestone, a golden age, a time when your children surround you in gratitude, when laughter echoes around a table heavy with food, and you sit at the head with the quiet dignity of someone who built everything they see. That's what I used to believe. What a fool I was. The rooftop was shimmering that evening. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed above the guests like a net trying to hold in something divine. There was soft jazz playing from live musicians, and beyond the railing stretched the city skyline, blushing gold in the sunset. The venue wasn't rented, it belonged to my daughter. My Meadow. My millionaire daughter. She stood tall in her white sheath dress, hair pinned into something sculptural and impossible, her arms bare and glowing. When I arrived, she kissed my cheek with a camera-ready smile and said, "You look beautiful, Mama. That blue scarf, it brings out your eyes." It was the only nice thing I owned. I'd bought it from a clearance bin 2 winters ago. "Thank you," I said softly. She guided me to the table like I was a visiting dignitary, nodding at waitstaff and offering casual air kisses to her friends. My son Elliot was already seated, laughing with his wife Bellamy. He didn't stand when I approached, didn't even glance at me. Tommy and Emma, my grandchildren, ran around the velvet-lined chairs, shrieking with joy. I waved at them. Emma looked at me for a second, then turned back to chase her brother. They hadn't seen me in weeks. No one had. The table was pristine. Place cards written in gold ink, crystal glasses, candlelight flickering against the silverware. There were at least 30 guests, but only 3 were family. My family, my daughter, my son, and his cold-as-glass wife. When the cake came out, 3 tiers of violet-streaked buttercream, I knew Meadow had spared no expense. There was even a quartet that played a soft rendition of Happy Birthday. People clapped. Meadow stood up. "To my mother," she said, raising a glass. "Who taught me what resilience looks like? Who gave everything so that Elliot and I could become the people we are? This year, I wanted to give you something in return." She turned toward me, beaming. "I hope you're enjoying the apartment, Mama. The view, the balcony, your own little slice of peace." The guests clapped again. A few looked at me with what might have been envy. The mother of a millionaire being gifted an apartment in the city? Lucky woman. I couldn't breathe. I turned to Meadow. She leaned in closer, her arms still draped over the back of my chair. "Do you like it?" she whispered, her smile radiant, eyes glinting. I looked at her for a long time. Then, just loud enough for her to hear, I whispered back, "My daughter." "I live in a garage." Her body went rigid. Her smile froze in place, then cracked like glass under pressure. The crystal flute she held trembled in her hand. "What?" she said, the word barely audible. I repeated it slowly. "I've been living in garage for a year and a half." The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered at her feet. The table went silent. Someone gasped. Even the music paused, as if the instruments themselves felt the weight of what I said. Meadow turned to Elliot, confusion and horror dawning across her face. "You told me she had a proper place," she hissed. "You said she was fine." Elliot stood up abruptly. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't angry. He looked inconvenienced, as if I'd embarrassed him. "I didn't lie," he said, brushing off his blazer like he was shaking off dirt. "She has a roof. She has heat. It's more than some people have." My heart thudded in my chest. "The garage," I said softly. "It has no insulation, no plumbing. I shower at the gas station across the road. You know this, Elliot. You've seen it." "I have a family, Mom," he said coolly. "You said you didn't want to be a burden." I felt the air shift around us, the eyes of 30 strangers boring into me. Some looked confused. Some looked away. "I never said I wanted to live like this," I said, voice trembling now. "I never said I wanted to be forgotten." Meadow stared at her brother. "Is this true?" Elliot didn't answer. He just picked up his coat and walked away. Just like that. No apology. No explanation. Just the sound of his expensive shoes clicking against the marble as he vanished from his mother's birthday. The silence he left behind was unbearable. Bellamy stayed seated, face like stone, her hand tightening around her wine glass. The children had gone quiet too, watching with wide, confused eyes. Meadow slowly sank into her chair. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a napkin. You live in the garage, she repeated, like she couldn't comprehend it. For a year and a half, I said. No door, no stove, just me and the lawn equipment. But I didn't know, she whispered. I thought you were taken care of. You thought wrong. She looked up at me, mascara beginning to smudge. And suddenly, I wasn't the one who felt small anymore. I wasn't the one sitting in shame. The rooftop had emptied out. Guests filtered out with polite excuses and pitiful glances. Some avoided eye contact altogether, unsure whether to say goodbye or flee the discomfort they'd just witnessed. The cake sat untouched, the champagne flat in flutes. A party meant to celebrate me had turned into a reckoning. Meadows sat slumped in her chair, her eyes glassy, makeup smudged. She didn't look like the woman who had built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up. She didn't look like the daughter who once carried an entire science fair volcano on the bus just to surprise me. She looked like a child who realized too late that something precious had been neglected. She leaned forward and whispered, "You've been living in the garage this entire time?" I nodded. Her voice trembled. "For how long?" "A year and a half," I said. I watched her flinch. "It's not like I didn't try to make it livable," I added softly. "I cleaned it out myself. Hauled out the rakes, the boxes of Christmas decorations, the spider webs thick as lace. I scrubbed the concrete floor and set up a camp bed that used to be Elliot's. Remember? The one from his high school camping trip." Meadow didn't answer. The heater he gave me broke after a month. It would turn on for 5 minutes, click, and then blow cold air. I stuffed towels under the door to keep the wind out. Some nights, I'd boil a kettle just to hold my hands over the steam. The nights were the worst. I could hear the wind pushing against the thin garage door. There was a draft that used to whistle through a crack in the frame. I tried to fix it with duct tape. Meadow covered her mouth, tears streaming now, real and ugly. "Mama, why didn't you tell me?" I didn't want to seem ungrateful. She looked at me like she'd been slept. "Ungrateful," she whispered. "You were freezing in a garage. You were boiling kettles for warmth. That's not ungrateful, that's suffering." I thought maybe I deserved it, I admitted, the words catching in my throat. I thought maybe this was just how things go when your children grow up. You shrink to fit into the corners they leave for you. "No," she whispered. "No, Mama. That's not how it's supposed to be." I looked out across the city skyline. You know what's funny? I told myself it was temporary, just until the apartment was ready. Elliot said there were delays with the contractor, that permits were slow. Every time I asked, he gave me another excuse. I stopped asking. She was shaking her head over and over. "I paid for that apartment," she said, voice hollow. "I signed a year-long lease on that place on Eucalyptus. I furnished it. I even had the designer come by. You were supposed to have a view of the park. Heated floors. A rainfall shower." I turned back to her. "I never saw it. Not once." "I've been paying the rent for 18 months, she whispered. "Over $4,000 a month. That's nearly $75,000. For what?" "For nothing." "Was it furnished?" "Yes, fully." I felt my stomach twist. So someone's been collecting rent. For an apartment I never moved into. "I assumed everything was fine," she said, her voice barely audible. "Elliot told me you were happy, that you wanted to live near the kids, that you liked the simplicity." I let out a breath that felt too heavy for my chest. I did want to be near them. But simplicity shouldn't mean poverty. Simplicity shouldn't mean cold and silence and fear of asking for more. She put her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. "I believed him," she said. "I trusted him. I called a few times to check in, and he always said you were great, that you were adjusting, that you didn't like city traffic or elevators." He lied. "Yes." There was a long pause, just the faint hum of the city around us. She looked up suddenly. "He said he stayed with you sometimes, that you had dinner together, that Emma liked to fall asleep in your lap." I blinked slowly. Elliot hasn't stayed longer than 20 minutes in months, and only when Bellamy's out. He never eats with me. Sometimes he drops the kids off, but they don't stay. Bellamy said the garage was too dusty. She once told Emma not to sit on my bed because Grandma's place isn't clean. She said that to a 5-year-old. Meadow looked stricken. They never asked me to come in for dinner. Not once, I said. I waved through the glass while they laughed inside. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to seem jealous or bitter. I didn't want to be that mother. Silence hung heavy between us. That's what I don't understand, she finally said. How did I not see this? How did I walk past you so many times and never notice? Because silence makes people invisible. I smiled when you came by. I said I was fine. I waved from the garage. And I thought, if I just kept quiet long enough, eventually someone would notice the cracks. She looked at me, and in that moment, I saw something break inside her. Maybe pride, maybe certainty, maybe the belief that love, once given, automatically keeps itself. Mama, she said, voice raw, I swear to you, I didn't know. But I'm going to fix this. I'm calling the leasing office tonight, and tomorrow we'll go see the apartment together. If it's still empty, I'll move you in myself. And Elliot? I asked quietly. She went still. I called him, she said after a moment, right after he left. He answered, but he sounded indifferent. He said he didn't see what the big deal was, that you chose to live simply, that you were independent. He said he visited often, that the kids loved their time with you. I nodded slowly. He's good at telling stories. He said you never complained, that if you were uncomfortable, you would have said something. I laughed, low and bitter. So the burden's on me now, because I didn't scream loud enough from the garage. Neto's face crumpled. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have asked more. I should have listened more. I thought I was doing right by you. You were. In your heart, you were. But silence, mine and yours, became the thing that let this happen. And suddenly, it wasn't just the garage that felt cold anymore. It was everything. Grief doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in slowly, winding itself through every crack in your life until suddenly nothing feels familiar anymore. After my husband Paul passed away, the house felt like an echo chamber, every hallway too quiet, every room too big. I used to wake up expecting the smell of his aftershave or the sound of his keys in the door, only to find myself surrounded by silence. I didn't have time to mourn properly. I had 2 children, a mortgage, and a stack of bills that seemed to grow taller by the day. So I did what I'd always done. I worked. I scrubbed office buildings at night, worked as a cashier in the afternoons, and picked up hours at a bakery on weekends. I used to fall asleep standing up on the bus ride home. Everything I earned, I tucked away for Meadows' education. She was brilliant, even as a child. The kind of girl who read medical textbooks for fun and corrected her teachers when she was 10. Her dream was Harvard. Not because it was prestigious, but because she wanted to stand on the shoulders of giants and become one herself. She wanted to change the world, and I wanted to make sure the world couldn't ignore her. The day her acceptance letter came, she cried. So did I, but not out of fear, out of pride. We sold the house 3 weeks later. It wasn't just a house. It was where I raised them. The dent in the hallway where Elliot rode his bike inside. The backyard tree meadow used to climb until she fell and broke her arm. Paul had laid the tiles in the kitchen himself. But dreams are expensive. Harvard doesn't accept love as payment. The money from the sale covered Meadows' first year and some living expenses. To stretch it further, we moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment near campus. She had the larger room to study in peace. I took the smaller one, which barely fit a twin bed and a dresser. I never complained. She studied late into the night, sometimes until sunrise, and I'd make her tea. I cooked her meals in a tiny kitchenette and packed her lunches like she was still my little girl. I worked part-time cleaning offices near campus and full-time as a hospital orderly. The same uniform every day, the same sore feet. But when I saw Meadow excel, it made every ache worth it. Elliot, however, saw things differently. He was 14 when Paul died. Too old to be shielded from reality, too young to process it with compassion. I didn't see it at first, the slow build of resentment. I thought he understood. He had a roof, meals, clothes. I thought that was enough. But I missed the signs. He didn't complain when we sold the house. He didn't argue when we downsized. But he grew quiet, withdrew. He would come home from school, drop his bag, and retreat to his room. Sometimes I'd find his dinner plate untouched. He didn't hug me goodnight anymore. One day, I overheard him talking to a friend on the phone. Everything's about Meadow, he'd said. It's like I don't exist. We gave up everything for her dream. Those words cut deep. I tried to talk to him that night, told him that I loved him just as much, that we were doing this for all of us so that Meadow could make a difference and one day help him too. But he didn't want to hear it. She gets everything, he snapped. The best schools, your attention, even Dad's savings. What do I get? Leftovers? A fold-out couch. He wasn't entirely wrong. I had poured everything into Meadow's future, not because I loved her more, but because she had a path. A clear, blazing path. I was trying to hold the door open for her while also dragging Elliot along behind me. I didn't realize he felt like a burden. Over time, that resentment hardened into something permanent. Even after Meadow graduated and became everything we hoped she would be, Elliot never let go of that bitterness. He went to community college for a year, then dropped out. Got into real estate, then bounced to sales. Always chasing something, but never rooted. Whenever Meadow came home, Elliot was cold. He barely spoke to her. They never fought, not openly, but the distance between them grew wider with every success Meadow celebrated. Promotions, awards, magazine interviews. Elliot watched from the sidelines and saw it all as confirmation. Meadow had always been the favorite. And no matter how many times I tried to bridge the gap, he wouldn't let me. His hurt had calcified into quiet cruelty. He never raised his voice, but he stopped seeing me. I became a convenience. Someone who watched the kids, someone who could be stored in the garage because she didn't mind simplicity. He remembered every sacrifice I made for Meadow, and he never forgot how it made him feel invisible. People assume betrayal is loud. A slammed door, a shouted accusation, a dramatic reveal. But in my case, it was quiet. It wore the mask of a smile. It spoke in the tone of someone who only wants what's best. And it began with the words, "I'll take care of it, Ma." After Meadow offered to support me, genuinely, generously, Elliot inserted himself into the conversation, like a shadow across sunlight. "She's too busy," he said. "Always flying somewhere, always filming something. Let her live her life. Let me take care of you. I'm here, right? I see you every week." We were sitting at my old dining table when he said it. I remember how his hands rested casually on the table, palms up, as though offering me safety. As though his words were a gift. "I just don't want you to get lost in all that corporate chaos," he continued. "Meadow's heart is in the right place, but she has no idea how to manage someone's real needs. Let me handle it. You'll be safer." I hesitated. Meadow had called just days earlier with excitement bubbling through the phone. "I found a place for you," she said. "Right near a park, 2 bedrooms, a little balcony. It's not huge, but it's yours." I had cried when she said that. Not because of the space, but because someone had thought about me. But Elliot was so sure, so calm. "Ma, she's throwing money at the problem. I'll do it properly. I've already got a place in mind, closer to us. You'll be near the kids every day. Near the kids." That was the hook. That was always the hook. So I said yes. Within a week, Elliot called and said he had the perfect temporary spot, just while the apartment paperwork gets sorted. I remember standing in front of the garage for the first time, clutching a plastic bag with my clothes in it, looking at what he called a starter setup. The garage was attached to the side of their house, but separated by a solid wall. It had a cement floor, a single flickering bulb in the ceiling, and a thin mattress on a fold-out cot. A card table stood in the corner with a wobbly chair beside it. He pointed at a space heater like it was a luxury item. "It's just for a little while," he said. "You're lucky. Some people don't even get this much." I hesitated. "It's not really insulated." He gave me a look. Not angry, but something close to tired disappointment. "Ma, don't make this harder than it is. I'm doing everything I can. You said you didn't want to live in the city. You said you wanted to be near the kids. I did. I do. Then this is what we've got for now. Don't ask too many questions." That phrase lodged itself in my brain. Don't ask too many questions. I nodded. Slowly. I was tired. I wanted to believe this was temporary. The next week, he handed me a debit card. We're going to keep things streamlined, he explained. All your expenses will go through this card. It's easier for me to manage everything bills, rent, groceries. I'll load it with money every month. You won't have to worry about a thing. But what about the card Meadow gave me? I asked. She'll just keep sending the money to me. I'll allocate it where it's needed. Don't worry, Ma. It's under control. I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed back. But those words, under control, sounded like security. And I was so used to doing without that a roof over my head, even a cold, dusty one, felt like mercy. So I accepted it. The heater broke 2 weeks in. I told him. He waved it off. I'll look at it this weekend. He didn't. I warmed water on a hot plate to bathe in a plastic basin. I wore my coat inside. My hands cracked from the cold. When I told him it was hard to sleep, he rolled his eyes. You said you didn't need much. This is enough. Groceries became sparse. I started buying peanut butter and bread in bulk, canned soup, oatmeal. When the card declined, I'd call him. He'd answer curtly, You're going through it too fast. I'll add more next week. Sometimes I'd go days without seeing him. Other times, he'd drop the kids off for an hour while Bellamy ran errands. He never stayed. The kids never came inside the garage. It's dusty, Bellamy would say, not bothering to lower her voice. Emma's allergies will act up. One night, after a particularly long stretch of silence, I asked about the apartment Meadow had mentioned. The one she said she rented for me. Fully furnished. Beautiful view. I asked where it was. Elliot turned to me, jaw clenched. You're still on that, he said. I told you, that fell through. There were issues with the lease. Meadow doesn't understand real estate. She overpromised. You're lucky I stepped in when I did. But she said stop, he snapped. Just stop. I'm handling this. I'm not going to argue with you every time. If you don't want my help, you can figure it out on your own. My stomach turned. I was almost 65. I had no job, no savings, no home of my own. What choice did I have? I'm sorry, I said quickly. I'm just tired. I appreciate everything you're doing. He softened, smiled even. It's okay, Ma. I know this isn't easy, but I've got it under control. He left not long after. That night, I lay on the narrow cot, wrapped in 2 blankets and wearing 3 sweaters. I stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. I had handed my life over to someone who saw my needs as an inconvenience. I had chosen silence, submission. I thought that would earn me care, patience, love. Instead, it bought me a garage and a card that declined at the pharmacy. I believed him when he said it was under control. I just didn't know who he was controlling. The sun rose pale and cold the morning after my birthday. It cast long, golden stripes across the kitchen tiles of Meadow's penthouse, where I sat wrapped in a borrowed cardigan, sipping weak coffee. Neither of us had slept. Meadow had spent the night pacing her immaculate living room, muttering things like, "How did I not know?" and "He lied to me for years." I didn't have answers for her, only my silence. "I want to see it," she said finally, standing at the edge of the glass balcony doors. "See what?" "The garage. I want to see where you've been living." I hesitated. "It's not worth it. It's just a space." She turned, and the look on her face startled me. It wasn't pity. It was rage. Controlled, elegant rage. I paid for an apartment, and my mother has been living in a concrete box. I need to see it. We drove in silence, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly the leather creaked. When we pulled into Elliot's driveway, her driveway, technically, since her name was still on the title from when she helped him secure the mortgage, Meadow stepped out without a word. I followed her to the side of the house, where the garage door sat warped from years of wind and moisture. She stared at it for a long moment before opening it. It groaned like a wounded animal. The light flickered overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the space I'd tried to make a home. The mattress sat low and thin, the sheets wrinkled and graying. The table, still covered in newspaper and crumbs, had one leg propped up with a stack of magazines. My coat hung from a nail in the wall. A hot plate balanced on top of a plastic crate, surrounded by cans of soup and oatmeal. The broken heater slumped in the corner, its cord coiled like a dead snake. Meadow didn't say anything. She walked slowly around the room, her heels echoing against the concrete. She bent to touch the cot, then ran her hand along the wall where the cold seeped in through cracks I'd stuffed with towels. When she turned to me, her face was pale. "You've been living like this?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper. I nodded. "For 18 months?" Another nod. She closed her eyes and inhaled sharply, then opened her purse and pulled out her phone. "I need to see the apartment," she said. "Right now." Before we could leave, we heard a door slam and footsteps hurrying around the corner. It was Bellamy. Her designer coat flared around her legs as she approached, her smile stretched tight and false. "Meadow." "Oh, we weren't expecting you today." Meadow didn't respond. She crossed her arms. Bellamy's eyes darted toward the open garage. Her expression faltered. "We're in the middle of renovations," she said quickly. "It's only temporary. Elliot told me everything. Your mother insisted it was fine renovations." Meadow asked coldly. "Yes, well, the apartment needed new permits, so this was just a short-term arrangement. Elliot's been handling everything." I stepped back. I didn't want to speak, but something inside me was cracking open. Bellamy's eyes landed on me. "You said you were fine with it. You told me you preferred the quiet. You said the heater worked, I said it broke," I said softly. "Well, Elliot said you didn't want to move again, because I didn't know I had another option." Meadow stepped between us. "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice hard. "You knew. You both knew. And you let my mother sleep on a cot in a garage while I paid for an empty apartment." Bellamy's composure slipped. "It wasn't my decision. Elliot said it was better for the family, that your mother didn't need much." "I'm taking her to the apartment," Meadow said, stepping forward. Bellamy moved to block her path. "You can't. There are tenants there now." Elliot said, "Get out of my way." It wasn't a request. It was a command. Bellamy stepped back. We left that place behind, garage, silence, shame, and drove straight to the address Meadow had listed on every receipt, every lease agreement, every wire transfer. Eucalyptus Street. It was a tree-lined neighborhood with quiet sidewalks and manicured lawns. When we pulled up, the apartment looked pristine. A pale brick building with ivy climbing up the side, wrought iron balconies, and the faint sound of piano music from somewhere inside. "I paid a year in advance," Meadow muttered as we walked up the steps. 2 bedrooms. Full kitchen. Hardwood floors. A view of the park. She buzzed the leasing office. A young woman with a clipboard met us in the lobby. Her face lit up with recognition when she saw Meadow. "Oh, Miss Hargrove. I was wondering when you'd stop by. We've been holding the keys, but your brother said the tenant wouldn't be moving in for a while." Meadow's jaw clenched. "My mother is the tenant." The woman blinked. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was told it was for storage. The unit's never been used." Meadow turned to me slowly, her face a mask of fury and heartbreak. The elevator ride up to the 3rd floor was silent. Not awkward, not filled with tension, just silent in the way of people carrying too much to say. Meadow stood beside me, jaw tight, her eyes fixed on the glowing floor number. I could see the calculation behind them, gears grinding through betrayal, denial, and something darker that she hadn't let out yet. When the doors opened, the hallway smelled of eucalyptus and polished wood. Of course it did. This was Eucalyptus Street, after all. Unit 3B. She stopped at the door and hesitated. Her key, glinted in the sunlight coming through the hallway window. It slipped into the lock as if it had always belonged there. With a soft click, the door opened. And that's when my world shifted. The scent hit me first, not mildew or emptiness or dust, but lavender and lemon. Fresh flowers and warm light. The soft thrum of a central air system working silently in the background. The kind of stillness that only comes from a space carefully maintained. My steps faltered as I entered. The apartment was fully furnished. Luxuriously, lovingly so. Cream couches with decorative pillows. A soft blue rug beneath a mahogany coffee table. A bookshelf stacked with art volumes and glossy magazines. In the corner, a fiddle-leaf fig plant stretched tall, healthy, and watered. Then I saw the flowers. Not just one vase, but three. Hydrangeas on the dining table, lilies on the coffee table, a mixed bouquet in the kitchen, right beside the fridge, its petals full and freshly clipped. This isn't vacant, I whispered. Meadow walked past me like someone in a dream. She ran her fingers along the counter, opened a cabinet, plates stacked neatly, wine glasses hanging in rows. She pulled the fridge open, and there it was. Milk, eggs, juice, Bellamy's favorite almond yogurt, Elliot's pale ale, tucked behind a carton of orange juice. She closed the fridge slowly, deliberately. I stood in the center of the living room, afraid to touch anything, afraid that the truth was so much worse than we'd imagined. Then I saw the shoes. Elliot's, sitting neatly beside the bedroom door. Meadow walked in without hesitation. I followed. The bed was made. Perfectly, but not showroom perfect. Lived-in perfect. A silk nightgown draped over the arm of a chair. Bellamy's hairbrush on the nightstand. A half-empty bottle of her perfume beside it. My knees buckled, and I lowered myself onto the edge of the bed. The softness was jarring. A betrayal in every cushion. They lived here, I said softly. They lived here the whole time. Meadow didn't reply. She opened the closet. Clothes hung in neat rows. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but sharp. This apartment has never been empty. I looked up at her. I thought my throat tightened. I thought maybe they forgot. Maybe they just lost track of things. Maybe they were waiting for the right moment to move me in. But this is worse. They used my money, Meadow said, her voice flat. They used your money. They didn't just steal your space. They stole your safety. I looked at her, confused. What money? She turned to me, eyes blazing. The trust. What trust? She froze. Mama, I set up a living trust for you. Years ago, when I sold my second company. It was supposed to cover housing, bills, healthcare, even travel. It was meant to ensure you'd never need to worry about anything. You and I were co-beneficiaries. Elliot and I were co-trustees. I let him handle things because I was always on planes, always in meetings. But I monitored the reports. They looked normal, routine. My heart thudded. I never heard of it. He was supposed to send you monthly deposits, cover expenses, report any major decisions to me. I couldn't breathe. How much? 7 figures, she said without blinking. My hand shook. And he didn't give me a dime. Meadow nodded once, slowly. Because he was. Just not to you. The rent, the utilities, the groceries for this apartment, all of it came from the trust. I looked around the room again. Suddenly, every object was poisoned. The throw blanket, the designer furniture, the soft sheets, they were all bought with money that was meant to protect me, nurture me. I was never supposed to be in that garage. I was supposed to be here. And Elliot knew it. He forged your life, Meadow said quietly. He convinced me that everything was fine, that you preferred something simple, that you were living in comfort. Meanwhile, he was enjoying the luxury I built for you. I tried to speak, but nothing came. I remembered the nights I'd gone to sleep hungry, the space heater I'd begged him to replace, the time I'd asked for a new coat and he'd told me I should learn to stretch what I had, all while he was living in the apartment my daughter bought for me. I never asked for anything, I said, more to myself than her. I was just so grateful you even thought of me. I didn't want to seem greedy. You weren't greedy, Meadow said fiercely. You were kind. And he used that kindness against you. We stood there for a long time. The sun poured in through the wide windows, lighting up the space that had been stolen from me in silence. And then Meadow's phone rang. She looked at it. Elliot, she said. Her lip curled. He has no idea we're here. She declined the call. Let's go, she said. Go where? To the leasing office. I want the keys changed. I want every trace of him erased from this place. And after that, I'm calling my lawyer. He's not taking another cent from your trust. Not one more cent. And I followed her. Out of the apartment. Out of the lies. Because I was done sleeping in silence. It was time to come home. The call came just after sunset. Meadow's phone lit up with Elliot's name again, but this time, she didn't decline. She answered and said 4 words that would ignite the fire. You need to come. He arrived 30 minutes later. He didn't knock. The door swung open as if it still belonged to him, and Elliot walked in with the confidence of a man who believed he still had control. His face was red, his hair disheveled, and his tie, loosened and skewed, suggested he'd stormed out the moment his accounts froze. What the hell is going on? He barked the moment he saw Meadow. Why is the trust frozen? Why are you acting like I'm some criminal? He didn't even glance at me. You've been siphoning funds for over a year, Elliot, Meadow said coldly. I've reviewed every withdrawal, every false invoice, every rent payment under your name. You are a criminal. He scoffed, then laughed. So what? I'm your brother. You think this is some Netflix courtroom drama? You're not cutting me out of anything. You already cut yourself out the moment you put your mother in a garage and moved into her apartment with your wife. He winced. You manipulated our trust, she went on. You lied. You misled both of us. And you let your own mother, our mother, live like a squatter while you drank wine under her roof. He finally looked at me then, but not with remorse. With desperation. Ma, he said, softening his tone. You know it wasn't like that. I was just keeping things simple for you. You've always been, modest. You said you didn't need much. I said I didn't need much, I echoed slowly, not that I deserved nothing. His mouth twitched. I took a step forward. I slept with a broken heater through 2 winters. I boiled water on a hot plate to wash my face. You told me the apartment wasn't ready. You said you were taking care of things. I was, he shouted suddenly. You think this life is easy? I've got 2 kids, a wife with demands, work, real work. I made sure you had a roof. I checked in. I bought you food. No, I said. You brought me scraps. He looked like he'd been slapped. Meadow stood quietly at my side, arms crossed, like a general watching justice unfold. I've transferred full authority of the trust to her, she said. The apartment's deed is now in her name. All keys have been changed. You are no longer a trustee or a tenant. You are, legally and financially, out. You can't do that, he shouted. I helped build that trust. I handled everything. Exactly, Meadow said. You handled everything. You turned help into control. You kept her quiet and cold so you could live in her warmth. His voice broke. It wasn't like that. I was just trying to keep things together. No, I said, stepping closer, my voice even. You were trying to keep me down. He blinked at me, suddenly vulnerable. Like a boy who realized his tantrum wouldn't change the consequences this time. So what now? He spat. You gonna cut me off? Pretend I don't exist? You did that first, I said. He opened his mouth again, ready to plead or threaten. I couldn't tell. But I didn't let him. I washed your clothes when your father died, I said. Held your hand while you sobbed. I gave up dinners, sleep, my own dreams, so you could have yours. And when I finally asked for a piece of peace in return, you gave me a garage. He stared at the floor. And when Meadow tried to give me something better, you stole it. His lip trembled. I was angry, he muttered. You always loved her more. No, I said. She just never used that love as a weapon. His shoulders slumped. So that's it? Yes. You're cutting me out? I inhaled slowly. Elliot, listen to me. He looked up, desperate for mercy. You are no longer my son. His entire body jerked, like the words struck deeper than any slap. His breath caught. His eyes widened. He staggered back, shaking his head. You don't mean that, he whispered. But I did. I had never spoken a truth more clearly in my life. You stood by while I was cold, sick, and ashamed, I said. You watched me wave from a garden like I was some distant memory. You let your children think I was something to be pitied. You took this safety your sister built for me and claimed it as your own. I stepped aside and pointed to the door. Get out. He hesitated, his pride and disbelief warring inside him. He looked at Meadow once more, but she didn't move, didn't speak. Her face was stone. And slowly, Elliot turned and walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't shout another word. The click of it closing behind him was louder than thunder. I stood in the silence afterward, heart racing, breath shallow. Meadow moved beside me and took my hand. I had imagined this moment for months, me confronting the injustice, standing up for myself, feeling empowered. But what I felt was simpler. peace. He was gone. And in his absence, I finally had room to begin again. It's strange how quickly the body adapts to comfort when it has spent years in denial. The first night in the apartment, I didn't sleep for long, not because I was uncomfortable, but because the silence felt unfamiliar. Not the silence of neglect or abandonment, but the quiet hum of safety. A silence without the sound of engines starting next door, or the drip of rain through a leaky garage roof, or mice skittering under the cot. Here, I heard only the soft creak of hardwood when I moved, the rhythmic sigh of central heating, and the occasional distant laughter from someone walking beneath the balcony. I awoke at dawn, not from cold, but because light pooled so gently through sheer curtains that my body stirred naturally. No alarm, no rustling from above, just light and peace. The bed, an actual bed, was supportive and soft. I lay there a moment longer than I intended, absorbing the sheer absurdity of this new life. A bed, a warm room, curtains, my own kitchen. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's dream. But no, this one was mine. When I finally rose, Meadow was already in the kitchen, barefoot, her long hair twisted into a sleepy braid. I didn't sleep either, she admitted with a sheepish grin, placing a mug of tea in front of me. Too many thoughts. I smiled. I slept. Just not all the way through. It's strange, not hearing the wind whistle through the cracks in the wall. She froze. Her smile dropped. You were hearing wind inside? I nodded. Meadow's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Not then. Instead, she opened a shopping bag and pulled out groceries. Eggs, fresh bread, strawberries. The good kind read all the way through. I remembered what you used to make when I had finals, she said. French toast with cinnamon. You'd cut the crusts off, even when I said you didn't have to. You always said crusts were stress, I replied with a smirk. She laughed, but there was a quiver in it. I should have been here sooner, Mama, she said quietly. I didn't answer. Not yet. That afternoon, she insisted I visit the doctor. I argued at first, reflex, really, but she wouldn't budge. I made the appointment already. They know everything. You're not going alone. It had been years. I'd meant to go, of course. I'd thought about it every winter when the joint pain crept in. Every time I lost my balance on the icy pavement outside the garage. Every time my heart fluttered strangely, and I told myself it was just fatigue. But appointments cost money. And time. And neither of those had belonged to me in a long while. The doctor was kind. She didn't blink when I listed my ailments. She just listened, nodded, and made notes. She ordered blood tests, scheduled physical therapy, and prescribed vitamin supplements. When I returned home, I had a folder of recommendations and a daughter who wouldn't let me lift a single bag. You're not lifting anything for a month, she said. Doctor's orders. They weren't, I murmured. They are now, she countered. Later that night, we sat on the balcony together with mugs of tea, wrapped in blankets. The city buzzed below, a lullaby of life that felt distant, manageable. I stared at the moonlight casting shadows on the floor, thinking of the garage and how I used to pretend the crack in the ceiling was a skylight. I taught you to ignore me, I said suddenly. Meadow turned sharply. What? All those years, I continued. I worked myself raw, never asked for help. Said I didn't need anything. I was proud of it, how little I could survive on. I made that my identity. So of course you believed me. She looked at me, horrified. I should have known better. You gave up everything so I could go to Harvard. I knew that. I felt that. And still I let him handle you like an errand. You were building your life. I didn't want to add to your burden. She shook her head. That's just it. I was so busy building that I didn't stop to ask if I'd left something behind. You didn't leave me behind. He did. You trusted him. So did I. Her voice broke then, tears slipping down her cheeks. But I could have checked in more. I had the money, the time. I paid for the apartment. I didn't even visit it. I just assumed, God, Mama, I assumed you were okay because it was easier to believe that than to face what might not be. I reached out, gently cradling her hand. Sweetheart, we were all playing roles we didn't know how to leave. You were the provider. I was the quiet survivor. And Elliot. Elliot was angry. Always angry. I'm sorry, she whispered. I forgive you, I said. I forgave you before I even knew I needed to. But I want to do more than say sorry, she said, straightening. I want to show it. No more garage. No more silence. No more survival. I want to know you not just as my mother, but as Simone, who you were before we took everything from you. The name felt strange. Simone. Not Ma, not Mom, not the woman behind meals and rides and nights of worry, but a person. A woman. A woman who deserved more than a mattress in a garage and a role in someone else's life. So we began again. We made breakfast together, took walks in the park. She showed me how to use a smartphone. I showed her how to make stewed tomatoes the way Paul used to love. She told me stories about boardrooms and breakups. I told her about the night I thought I saw Paul's ghost in the hospital, sitting quietly on the edge of the staff kitchen table, just watching me pour coffee with shaking hands. We laughed. We cried. We began to rebuild not just a relationship, but a truth between us. Without Elliot, he didn't call, and we didn't chase him. One morning, as I opened the windows to let the breeze in, I realized something strange. This apartment no longer felt like someone else's gift. It felt like mine, and I was no longer apologizing for occupying space in the world. For the first time in a very long time, I was living a life that belonged to me. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang. A quiet, cloud-covered kind of day, the type that made you want to curl up with a book and forget the world outside. I was in the kitchen, slicing apples for a tart, when Meadow answered the door. I heard her voice, low and cautious. Then the sound of the door closing gently. Mom, she called, there's someone here to see you. He says it's important. I dried my hands on a towel and stepped out, expecting maybe a neighbor or someone from the building management. Instead, I found a tall man in a dark gray suit, holding a briefcase and looking strangely out of place in the warmth of our apartment. His expression was professional, but not cold. Miss Simone Hargrove, he asked. Yes. My name is Daniel Roth. I'm a private investigator. May I speak with you privately? Meadow crossed her arms. She's not speaking to anyone without me here. He gave a respectful nod. That's fine. I'm here on behalf of, well, you may find this strange. I was hired by Bellamy. That caught us both off guard. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, neatly clipped and organized. Your daughter-in-law retained me several months ago. At the time, she suspected your son was hiding financial assets. She thought it was about business, possible tax evasion, misuse of your daughter's trust, that sort of thing. Meadow's eyes narrowed. Go on. Mr. Roth laid the folder on the table and opened it. It turned out to be far more serious than she anticipated. Elliot was building a legal case. A slow one. Quiet, but meticulous. He pulled out a sheet, photocopies of legal forms, some with highlighted text. He was working toward having you declared legally incompetent. My knees nearly buckled. I reached for the chair behind me, lowering myself slowly. He consulted with elder care attorneys. He documented what he called your episodes, claims of paranoia, memory loss, unstable behavior. He filed preliminary drafts of petitions for conservatorship. Meadow paled. Wait, he was trying to gain legal custody of her? Yes, Mr. Roth said grimly. Not just for control of her medical decisions, but financial. He was building a paper trail to justify it. And he wasn't subtle. He created a narrative that you were mentally deteriorating, refusing care, rejecting help. I was living in a garage, I said softly. I know, he said gently. I've seen the photos. He turned the page. More documents. Statements. He opened multiple accounts in your name. Small withdrawals first. Nothing to trigger alarms. Then larger ones. He listed himself as a caretaker on one. Bellamy didn't realize until a joint tax document arrived with both your names on it. Meadow leaned over the table, eyes scanning the reports. These are forged. These notes, these quotes, this isn't my mother. This is fiction. Not entirely fiction, Mr. Roth said. He used just enough truth to make it believable. He wrote that you refused the heater repair because of delusional paranoia about electrical wiring. That you isolated yourself, claimed people were stealing from you, rejected food he provided. My head spun. He even documented instances where you wept during visits, calling it emotional instability. He painted you as a woman descending into early dementia. Meadows stood there, frozen. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Not because it was surprising, but because it wasn't. Somewhere deep down, I had felt the chill of something darker beneath Elliot's neglect. His insistence that I stay quiet. His refusal to replace the heater. The way he spoke to me as though I were fragile, barely tethered to reality. And now I saw why. He hadn't just wanted my silence. He wanted control. Permanently. Legally. Irrevocably. He even had a psychiatric evaluation request saved as a draft, Mr. Roth said, and emails between himself and a doctor who owed him a favor. Bellamy backed out when she realized how far he was willing to go. She didn't tell us, Meadow muttered. She was afraid, he replied. Afraid that if she confronted him, he'd drag her into it. So she hired me. He placed one final document on the table, a handwritten note, Elliot's signature at the bottom. He wrote this 2 months ago. A personal affidavit stating his mother was prone to lying about her living conditions, had violent outbursts, and was a risk to herself. I stared at it. The loops of his signature. Familiar. Intimate. Now repulsive. He was going to trap you legally, Mr. Roth said. Take over your decisions. Transfer the rest of the trust to himself. Possibly even move you into a state-run care facility. Neto sank into a chair beside me, hands shaking. I felt nothing. Not yet. Just a vast, echoing numbness. I thought he was indifferent, I whispered. I thought he didn't care. But he did. Just not about me. Mr. Roth closed the folder. I'm giving all this to your attorney, he said. Bellamy has already filed a formal statement of withdrawal. She's cooperating. I nodded slowly. Thank you. As he left, Meadows sat beside me, staring at the door. He wanted to erase you, she said softly. No, I replied. He wanted to replace me, with the version of me he could control. She took my hand. But he can't. Not anymore. No, I said, feeling the old steel return to my spine. Not ever again. The courtroom was quiet. Not solemn, quiet in the way of places where something irreversible is about to happen. I sat beside Meadow at the front, the folder of evidence Mr. Roth had compiled now bound in court filings and stamped with official seals. Everything we had uncovered, every forged document, every secret account, every attempt to rewrite the truth of my life was laid bare on paper and screen. Elliot sat across the room. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but inwardly. His suit hung loose. His hair, always perfectly styled, was limp with sweat. He didn't look at me. Not once. The judge's voice was calm but ironclad. Mr. Hargrove, you are charged with multiple counts, including financial elder abuse, wire fraud, identity theft, and falsification of legal documents. His attorney rose and announced the plea, guilty on all counts. The room didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The truth had been dragging its way into the light for months, and now it simply sat beside us, undeniable. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Elliot finally stood. His voice shook, not with emotion, but with exhaustion. I don't know when it started, he said, staring at the floor. I don't know when I began seeing my mother not as a person, but as a burden. I told myself I was protecting her, that she was safer when I was in control, that she didn't need anything because she'd never asked for anything. But that was a lie, and I told it so often that I forgot what she looked like when she smiled. He paused. A silence so complete followed that I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. I stole from her, he continued. Not just money. I stole years. Comfort. Her peace of mind. Her dignity. I betrayed her trust and used her silence as an excuse. He turned toward the judge, not toward me. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. That was the only honest thing he had said in a long time. The judge delivered the sentence with clarity and weight. 3 years in prison, mandatory restitution of all misused funds, and a permanent mark on his professional and legal record. But more than the sentence itself, it was the judge's closing words that settled into my bones. This was not just a theft of finances, he said. It was a theft of freedom. A mother, once fiercely independent, was systematically silenced and diminished by someone who should have been her protector. This court recognizes the damage done, not only to her bank account, but to her personhood. As gavel met wood, the courtroom exhaled. It was over, but something inside me had just begun. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered like thieves. Meadow placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "We don't have to speak to them." "I want to," I said. "I need to." They asked questions: what had happened, how long it went on, how I felt about the sentencing. I answered honestly, not with bitterness, but with purpose. My story isn't unique, I told them. It's just unusually public. There are thousands, millions of elderly people who live in silence, who sleep in garages, who hand over their power out of love and watch it turned against them. One reporter asked, "What will you do now?" I looked into the camera lens as though it were the eyes of someone just like me. Alone, afraid, silenced. "I'm going to fight," I said. Not just for myself, but for them. For every mother who's ever been made to feel like a burden. For every father stripped of his home, his voice, his name. I was nearly erased, but I'm still here. And my voice isn't going anywhere. That night, back at the apartment, Meadow and I sat under the soft light of the balcony, tea in hand, silence between us. But it was a new kind of silence now. Not shame, not fear, just peace. And behind it, power. Spring arrived slowly, like a hand reaching gently across my shoulder, nudging me toward the light. It had been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since I looked my son in the eyes and said goodbye, not to the boy I had raised, but to the man he had become. 6 months since I reclaimed not just my apartment, but my voice. And in those 6 months, I learned how to live again. I enrolled in a gardening class at the local community center. It felt frivolous at first, indulgent even, to spend mornings elbow-deep in soil and seed catalogs. But it brought me a kind of joy I hadn't known I was still capable of. There was something deeply healing about coaxing life from the dirt. Something sacred about watching green sprout from a patch of nothing. My balcony bloomed by April. Cherry tomatoes, mint, dwarf sunflowers that turned to face the light just like I had, slowly but surely. Meadow came to every class she could. She'd sit beside me with her sleeves rolled up and her phone switched off, laughing when her rose grew crooked or her basil refused to thrive. "It's rebellious," she said once, holding up a limp sprig. Just like me. I joined a book club at the library next. A group of women, all over 60, all sharp as knives and funnier than anyone half their age. We read Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, thrillers, romance, everything. We sipped tea and debated plot twists. And when I mentioned that I used to write stories myself, they begged me to bring something to read aloud. For the first time in decades, I picked up a pen not as an escape, but as an offering. That's when I met Robert. He was the brother of one of the book club ladies, visiting from Santa Cruz. Retired contractor. Kind eyes. Laughed like a teenager. Wore flannel even in summer. We met over lemon bars and a shared fondness for mystery novels. He listened. That's what struck me most. He listened the way no one had in years, not waiting to speak, not offering solutions, just there. Present. Interested. One afternoon, as we walked through the park where my daughter had once promised me a view, he turned to me and said, "You don't shrink into the past. You wear it like something you survived." I didn't fall in love quickly. I wasn't even sure I was still capable of it. But something in Robert's steady presence made space inside me, and I allowed it to grow. Meadow noticed first. "You're glowing," she teased one morning. "Is that a gardening tan or Robert's doing?" "Maybe both," I replied, and didn't feel the need to hide my smile. My days became full, but never busy. Not the suffocating kind of busy I used to associate with survival, with making ends meet, with pushing pain to the corners. This was different. Gentle. Intentional. I painted a wall in the apartment a soft green. I filled a shelf with framed photos, not just of Meadow and me, but of me alone. Me in the garden. Me at the library. Me smiling, not because someone else asked me to, but because I wanted to. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I allowed myself to feel safe. There were no locked doors behind which I was hidden, no gaslighting, no apologies for taking up space, just a warm home, a warm daughter, and the slow warmth of healing. I often thought of the garage, not with resentment, but with reverence. That place had been my tomb in some ways, but it had also become my threshold. From silence to speech, from survival to living, from being erased to being remembered. And I, Simone, was no longer a supporting character in someone else's life. I was my own story now, with roots in the earth, words on the page, and love in full bloom. It was early June when Bellamy called. I hadn't expected to hear from her. After the trial, she'd moved across town, changed jobs, and quietly disappeared from our lives. I didn't blame her. Elliot had left wreckage in every corner of her world. She had every right to retreat. So when Meadow handed me the phone, mouthing, "It's Bellamy," I hesitated. But something in me said to answer. "Simone," she asked gently, her voice smaller than I remembered. "I hope this isn't too much, but could we come see you?" "Of course," I said without thinking. "When?" "We're already downstairs." I froze. Meadow went to open the door, and a moment later, they stood in my apartment's warm, sunlit entry. Bellamy, worn but graceful, hair longer, shoulders tenser, and beside her a little girl with dark curls and the wide, cautious eyes of someone raised in a home with too many rules and too few certainties. She couldn't have been older than 6. "This is Eliza," Bellamy said softly. "She's your granddaughter." My knees nearly gave way. Eliza peeked out from behind her mother's coat. She held a small stuffed elephant and wore a pink cardigan too big for her. "Hi," she whispered. I crouched slowly, not rushing, not invading, just opening. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "I'm your Grandma Simone." She blinked at me. "Can I call you Nana?" Tears welled instantly. "Yes," I said. "I would love that." She stepped forward, and before I could brace myself, those tiny arms were around my neck. She smelled like crayons and sunshine. And when I held her, something inside me broke open, something that had waited too long for the chance to bloom. I wept, not just tears of joy, but of release, of grief that had finally reached its end, of the mother I had been, the grandmother I could now become. Bellamy watched, tears in her own eyes. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know how much he was hiding, how much you were suffering. And when I found out, I wanted to fix it, but I didn't know how." "You just did," I said, still holding Eliza close. We sat together that afternoon. I made tea and sliced strawberries. Eliza explored the balcony garden, asking about every plant. When she found the sunflowers, she squealed with delight. "They're taller than me," she declared. "You're still growing," I said. "You'll catch up." Bellamy sat beside me while Eliza played. "I want her to know you," she said. "I want her to have strong women in her life. Women who don't use silence as power, who don't make love conditional, who teach her that kindness is strength, not weakness." I nodded, heartful. "I made mistakes," Bellamy added, "but I'm trying now. I want to raise her right." "You already are," I whispered. And in that moment, I understood what had been given to me. Not just a second chance at motherhood, but at legacy. I would read to Eliza from books filled with truth. I would teach her to grow basil and tomatoes and how to press flowers in heavy books. I would show her how to speak up even when her voice shook, how to love without losing herself, how to be bold, even if it meant standing alone. She would never sleep in a garage. She would never learn that silence is the price of love. We would build something new, not from inheritance, but from intention. And for the first time, I didn't look backward. I looked forward at a life still unfolding, at a child full of light, at a future without shadows.